Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Orchestrator Weekly. As always, we can have a look at the agenda today. But we don't have anyone from the Rook team here, so we are not going to have any status update, but I don't think that's going to be super interesting. I think that Travis made a Topo LVM status update last week in the Odds weekly call. But Seth, you're up to date, right? Up to speed?
On what?
Topo LVM.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, Juan Me's been working on that quite a bit, so he could probably give you an update.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you are aware of the latest news in this area, okay? But basically, well, it was decided to go with a completely new operator in order to use Topo LVM, because the current operator, well, the developer, the plans for the project was to include another providers. So it's going to be completely different of what we want, what we need, okay? So it was decided last week to go with a new operator. We are going to start from scratch, and our intention is to present the operator to the Topo LVM project in a couple of weeks, okay? The situation in this moment is just to start with the basic functionality that is required for Snow systems, okay, for single node deployments. That is a very simple configuration. But, well, there is a definition of the cluster, the LVM cluster CRT, where we can include devices and a selection of these devices and a selection of the nodes where the devices are going to be used to create persistent physical volumes, and after that with a storage class to be used as persistent volumes in Kubernetes or with a Rook operator. So this is the current state. Okay, we have it could be nice to collaborate with Sibosu, that is the company that most of the developers are working with Topo LVM. Okay, it could be nice, but I think that is almost impossible, because the current operator using Topo LVM is going to follow a completely different path of what we need. Okay, so we are going to start from scratch. I think that in a couple of weeks, probably we can provide a design to the Topo LVM project maintainers, and our aim is to put this operator under the Topo LVM project umbrella. This is the situation.
Yeah. That's a bit sad, you know. I was hoping for a better outcome.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's very difficult just to try to mimic the functionality that we have in Ceph ADM, okay, in order to create OSDs. Wow. Lot of things needed to do, and lot of pieces, more different moving pieces, okay. So it's difficult it's not as simple as just make the changes in the orchestrator.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
So we have concluded our policy endeavor. I don't think we have access to the policy cluster anymore. I think that was taken over by the policy folks again, and they're going to now start a production-based cluster. I think they told us that they're going to use Ceph Ansible and Pacific, at least if I remember correctly, that they're going to use Ceph Ansible in Pacific.
That's Ansible and the custom scripts for things that are too slow in Ansible.
Yep. You always see Ceph Ansible is too slow, Jeff. But we have the Giver cluster. Nate, you've set it up already.
Yep. Yeah, it's 40 nodes, 1,000 OSDs. It's using, it takes that one NVMe, it carves up into 25 LVs, and then uses the NVMe loopback on top of that. So they look like really small NVMe's basically. But the system's up, seems to be working. It's nice and stable. I think we should focus on trying to stress it. Probably the main thing that tripped up the Posy stuff is when we had hosts down. So I don't actually know what the command is to make IPMI or whatever it is turn nodes off and on, but those hooks exist. I just need to check with David. But we should learn what that is and then try turning nodes off and then like making sure that the system is well behaved with from user experience. Make sure it can still schedule when hosts are down, everything else still works. Make sure that you can enter a host maintenance node, that you can remove the host if it's like gone, whatever. But just like putz around with it, make sure that all those things sort of behave in a way that is friendly to the user.
Hmm. Well, how was the time to set up 1,000 OSDs? Do you remember?
No, I mean, the hardest part was like copying SSH keys around. Once I started deploying OSDs, I didn't actually watch the logs. You can go look at the log. I don't think it took that long. I just like let it go away. So I came back a little bit later, but it goes pretty quick because it's in parallel. I only realized after the fact that for the first like 2 days it wasn't using the agent. I didn't the agent turned on. So now the agent's on. I didn't realize that ahead of time. It might be a good opportunity to go test the Osd Drain like zap option. To like take a host and drain all the OSDs on one host and hit the zap thing and make sure it like goes and correctly will zap them and then reprovision them. There's a drive group drive spec or whatever in there called I'll use all devices or whatever. So it is configured right now to just turn every SSD into a OSD, so it's pretty easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any did you encounter things where Ceph ADM was just stuck and doing nothing?
I don't think so. I haven't managed to like wedge it. So that's good. The monitoring stack is deployed, but I haven't tried logging into the dashboard or anything. So I think this is a perfect environment for Ernesto to play with the dashboard. I think the scale is large enough that it should exercise pagination and all that stuff pretty well. Yeah. The main takeaway, what I mean not the main takeaway, but like the last big item thing that was affecting the Posy thing was where the manager kept freezing. I did eventually track that down to the progress module. And there's a pull request that is open right now that's going through testing that makes that much more efficient. But I haven't tested it on this Giba cluster yet. Basically, as soon as there are PGs that are appearing or whatever, so that there's one of those global recovery events going on, then every 5 seconds, the status progress module will do a PG dump, or would do a PG dump, which was like an obscene amount of metadata about every single PG, of which like 3 fields are being used. So there's a new manager pass-through command or whatever that only fetches exactly those 3 fields. That should reduce the lock hold time, basically. So I would expect like to be about 10x faster than what we were doing before.
What really strikes me is that we have seen problems in the progress module since for 2 years.
Yep.
Oh, and things are popping up again and again and again.
Yeah, I
How
think we
often
need.
do we want to how often do we want to fix a progress module?
I think we need to restructure it a little bit so that there is the progress infrastructure that allows other modules to register progress events as they see fit, and the part of the progress module that like tries to generate events for like Rados peering and stuff and recovery, because it's that Rados recovery trying to understand what's going on. That's the part that's really problematic and slow, and the overall infrastructure is, I think, mostly fine. So if we could separate out those two, I think that would help. Yeah.
Really strikes me that we have fixed so many fundamental issues with the progress module, and it still gets still doesn't scale properly.
Yeah, agree. I mean, it's kind of weird that it's the way that it's written. It's weird that the module is providing the service to other modules, and then passing them through to the monitor for status. It feels like it should be part of the overall module environment interface or whatever. But yeah, the problem is that progress module combines both the infrastructure and the like CPU intensive attempts to generate events.
Yep. But what's your gut feeling when you're going to see the next availability issue of the progress module?
That and Prometheus. I think that the Prometheus module is probably, I think that was also causing some problems on the Posi cluster. I'm guessing. At least that was that's what we thought was happening. So I think we should turn Paul loose on this system and try to stress the Prometheus stuff as much as possible. So like probably increase the rate at which we have things reporting in maybe, or make sure that there's like extra scraping of Prometheus. I don't know, whatever it is, like find some way to like measure how well or how poorly Prometheus is behaving. Let's see if we can push it over the edge. I think that'd be good.
Would actually be possible using the big suite. Big
suite?
Totality suite, yeah. But just trying to fetch the information out of the progress module and just verifying it that it just doesn't take over 100 seconds, or maybe just it returns proper data every few seconds instead of
that's a good idea.
Taking over 100 seconds.
Yeah, that'd be good. That could be added to the big suite.
Okay. Sage Adam, you mentioned a few days ago that the update algorithm of Ceph was a bit slow, upgrading all the crashed humans. It was fixed in the meantime, right?
It looks like it to me. The last upgrade I did was like super speedy.
Awesome.
Well, that part of it did all the crush.
That's great. Awesome. So we've gained so much from the Posi cluster and from the big suit.
I think somebody still needs to go through this document, basically item by item, and follow up either with like a tracker ticket or whatever, like basically translate that into like cards on the Trello board or something so that we actually make sure that we deal with all the issues.
Yeah, I think that was requested by the Posi box to just have a list of tracker items that came out of it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And I've also asked Sebastian, what are the things, that are going to affect, products at scale? What do we expect, from this, from a usability perspective, from a customer perspective, what is it, what is acceptable? Where are they going to have angst, from the point of view of timings or usability and that kind of stuff? So I'm not really sure based on everything I've read where that is. Is that fair, Sage? Or, it's I'm just not sure, reading all of it, it's all good stuff. We learned a lot, but what does it really mean at the end of it all with all the fixes?
What's the take-home message?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
really hard for me to put it. I mean, being so far
Oh,
removed from the technology, it's hard to put it in,
yeah.
terms of what a customer is going to see and how it will affect them. And
Well,
I
yeah. I mean, somebody needs to like come up with a narrative around it. I think we should do a blog post that basically summarizes like what happened. Posy gave us access. Thank you very much. Blah blah blah. What the environment looked like, and then like what we found. Um, I would start with that big list of all the tracker tickets, and try to like organize that a little bit. Um, but then one of the outputs of this should be a blog, and that can have like can frame it in some sort of narrative and like put it all in context. I think, which would be nice because I think we need to give credit to Posy and thank them. We need to like make people aware that we were able to test and like fix things at scale, and then also like make people aware that if they do have large environments that are going to be coming online and they have an opportunity to do testing, then collaborating with us is like good for them and good for us.
Mm.
Who's gonna go through that document and like make a list of pull requests and tracker tickets?
And anyone uh, raising his hand? Can try to do it. I take it.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Anything about Gale or Posy or uh, we have to talk about what's going on in Ceph ADM if a host goes offline.
Yes.
I think the behavior right now is it's the house is marked as offline in memory only, and then we are trying to connect to it. But I think we are trying. We are skipping the check host functionality, but everything else, I think it's skipped if the host is offline. So we are waiting for the check host to return succeed in order to mark it as online again. And as soon as it is online again, every other check host, every other feature is going to be enabled on it. But we have to think about evacuating hosts automatically as soon as a host is offline. That's not implemented in Ceph ADM at this point. Anyone expert in how Kubernetes does it?
I mean, OSDs are already handled, right? Like if
OSCs
they're
are
down long enough, then Rados will mark them down and out and rebalance. Um,
I might be able to answer the question. I also was distracted by someone messaging me, so I missed the initial the discussion. Sorry.
So how does Kubernetes handle offline hosts?
Handle
And
offline
can we
hosts.
learn from it?
That's a good question. I don't know super much the details of it. I think it does heart beating between the kubelet daemons that run on each host. And if a kubelet daemon can't be reached, Kubernetes assumes that it's down, even if it's just partitioned.
And then immediately starts rescheduling everything.
Yes. Yeah, so there are definitely things that can happen in Kubernetes failure scenarios where there's a network partition, but not hardware failure, where an application might be running in the same quote unquote cluster twice. If it's still running on the node that's partitioned or nodes that are partitioned. I'm not really sure how Kubernetes handles the scenario of coming back online once the partition is resolved. I assume that it just goes through and sees that whatever resource created that has more running things than it should and removes one of them. I'm not sure how it prioritizes which one.
Is there any inbuilt fencing mechanism for rescheduling pods onto different hosts?
I don't think so. I think Kubernetes assumes that applications follow the 12-factor application. Is that what it's called? That applications are stateless and yeah. So any fencing that needs to happen in Kubernetes, I think, has to be orchestrated by the application itself or some sort of coordinating application.
There is a timeout around 5 minutes after the node is considered down where it will start moving pods on its own. But there's definitely no fencing or limiting of applications.
Okay. Which means that if we want to do fencing, we have to. I mean, we need to do it completely by our own anyway, right? We are at the same level as Kubernetes in Ceph.
Is this on the topic of NFS specifically?
Yes, right.
Oh,
we
okay.
need to evacuate hosts in order to have failover for NFS, which is not implemented in Ceph. That was we discussed it in the stand-up a few days ago.
Yeah.
But if we want to implement NFS failover properly when a host goes offline, we really should think about how we want to deal with that problem in general, and not just for NFS.
I think that's a good point. I've been looking at NFS failover. That's what I did with my day of learning, and I don't know that I have any really great takeaways other than it's pretty complicated, and in Kubernetes it definitely needs some sort of application to coordinate. I can post a few links that I found though.
It seems like it comes down to the Ceph equivalent of the Osd down out interval, where in Rados, after the Osd is down for a certain amount of time, then we mark it out and trigger a rebalance. And similarly in Ceph if a host is not reporting, we don't instantly necessarily want to do something. There needs to be some time period where the host has been down for more than 20 seconds or 60 seconds or something before we start scheduling stuff. But I think it's easiest to think of it on a per daemon type to like decide what it should do. Because for example, if a manager is on a host that went down, like we can instantly reschedule it, right? Like there's basically this whole category of that's manager, RGW, and the MDS are all kind of like are all stateless, harmless if we run too many, right? So if that's the case, like you could have a down rebalance interval or whatever it is, like 1x the timeout, something like basically as soon as we fix it to something. Like
What was problem that Rook only has a single manager?
what is the problem?
What was the reason Rook only schedules a single manager? Has something to do with
Yes, it's for two reasons. Because there's a service. So all the services that the manager provides, we have a Kubernetes service that like routes to that port, and it like internally implements this like load balancer thing. And so previously the problem was that the standby managers and the active manager all answer. It's just the standby send a redirect. And so you'd load balance between the thing and a redirect to an internal IP that would break. And so that wouldn't work. And so we basically could only go to the one. Nowadays, we have an option where you can turn off that redirect behavior so that the standby manager won't do anything. So maybe now for Rook, we could run multiple managers if the load balancer is smart enough to the service only routes traffic to the one that happens to be answering on that port. But I'm not sure if that works right. We don't know if we've ever like sort of verified that that behaves the way we want it to. Maybe if it could change now, but yeah.
I mean, that really doesn't affect Ceph idea.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't help.
But in the case of the manager, we don't need to hurry up because the manager already has its own AJ cluster.
Yeah, there's no hurry, but also it's harmless to do it, so sooner is probably better. And I would put RGW MDS in the same category too. Hurry. I mean,
NFS is
really,
complicated.
I mean, the machinations that happen when we reschedule are complicated, but the only decision point is like, when do we reschedule? And I think for NFS, it's like as soon as the host goes down, or maybe I don't know. It seems like if we have a concept of like what the interval is before we reschedule, like it feels like that's like it could be that the monitor interval is like 1 day or something. Like if it's down for a day, then and it still doesn't come back up, then we go create a new monitor and update ceph.confs everywhere. Something like it doesn't usually not we aren't in a big hurry. Whereas for other things like NFS, for example, we want to make it like 20 or 30 seconds. We want to start rescheduling.
But we have to be sure that in case of flaky hosts, we are not ending up in a thrashing situation again, that we are just switching over between hosts so fast that we are just constantly rescheduling things around.
Yeah.
This might be the cause for the 5-minute timeout in Kubernetes.
The way that we dealt with that, we had the same problems in Ceph, where we had in like Bobtail, we had thrashing OSDs going up and down and up and down, and so we have there's sort of a back off so that if an OSD keeps getting marked down, every successive time it tries to come back up, it has to wait longer, and so there's sort of like a back off dampening effect. So maybe we could do the same thing, like if the agent keeps going offline, then we like tolerate longer and longer delays before we declare that it's offline.
Hmm. On the other hand, if you're just flapping every 5 minutes, then that shouldn't be big of a deal. Then you're just flapping every 5 minutes. So
Yeah. And I mean the way that it scheduling works, it's sort of sticky, so that if it's just one host that's flapping, like the first time it flaps, we'll reschedule everything somewhere else, and it can continue to flap, and nothing's going to happen because it's just going to stay. All the other services are going to stay where they were.
exactly. Ingress?
Ingress already has it's running its Keep Alive D with a virtual IP that has a really low timeout, so I don't think we need to be very aggressive about that.
Mm.
In fact, we should be relatively conservative, I think. But I guess if it would be nice if we could generalize all this to like one basically time delay for each based on type, then I think that like then I think we should be in pretty good shape. Like Osd will have none. I guess there's nothing there, but for all the other ones, like monitor the day or an hour or something, manager could be 5 minutes. Could be an MVS, like these could be 3 seconds. I mean, they could be short.
Really?
Fast, less
We don't need to reschedule LTW or NDS so fast. They are already
Yeah.
capable. We don't need to hurry.
Yeah. I guess they can be 5 minutes. Ingress, be 5 minutes. It's because I don't know how it works. These two are like can be super lazy here too, so these could be. Sure. But basically, I think it's just a matter of changing the scheduling code so that it's not just whether it's down, but how long it's been down, and so there's a threshold that gets crossed.
Yep.
That part, and then the second part, which is like the extra dimension of all this, is like, what about maintenance mode? What does maintenance mode do? Because I think maintenance mode should basically. I don't know that maintenance mode is any different than any of these, right? Like if you have a node that has a manager and you put it in maintenance mode, we should reschedule immediately, right? Like there's no reason not to move a manager. If it's in maintenance mode and it has a monitor, then like probably we should wait a day. Like I guess I'm wondering is there any real difference between maintenance mode and anything else? All these other things, like we should just reschedule aggressively because they're free.
As soon as we can reschedule, things are so much easier. At some point, in some regards.
I guess the main difference is that if a host's in maintenance mode and it reschedules, then we can still remove the daemons from the host that's in maintenance mode, right? So might still
We have to implement proper fencing.
do we? Like do we have anything that we ever have to fence? Like the only service I'm aware of that actually has to fence that Ceph ADM cares about is NFS, and it does its own fencing, right? Like when an old daemon and we deploy a new one, then we fence the old one using Rados. So we don't actually have to do anything via Ceph ADM. like removing things. It's just like cleanup, I guess. Not sure how iSCSI works. It might have to do some similar things.
Okay. So we have a
Maybe
plan.
a slightly different way to look at this. So the huge pain in the butt that I had with Osd was that there was a host that was offline and it was just like constant noise in the log and like everything was unresponsive and it was just like annoying until I just like removed the node. I couldn't mark it into put it in maintenance mode. The command wouldn't let me. And then when I ended up just having to remove it basically. So there's no like I think the fix is basically to make maintenance node like work. It's equivalent of like marking a host down or telling Ceph ADM to like stop touching it. I don't know what maintenance mode does. Like, what does maintenance mode enter do? Like, why is it slow? Is it not? Is it like trying to synchronously go and like evacuate the host or something?
I think it stops the system unit on the host, the Ceph system
Yeah.
unit.
We just need to make it so that you can skip that part.
Or we just force it to be offline.
Yeah. We don't. Do we even need to stop the unit? Like, I don't know.
That's how it was implemented.
Yeah.
We still have to refactor the maintenance mode because the maintenance mode and the offline status are overriding themselves.
Yeah.
So if you have a maintenance house in maintenance mode that is offline, I am not completely sure we are losing track of the maintenance mode and overriding it with the offline
Yeah.
status.
Yeah. It seems like it should basically force it into an offline state, so we don't touch the host. And there should be an option for whether or not to stop everything first or just update our state and stop touching the host.
Mm. Mm.
But then if there's an agent already running on that host, do we just leave it running and it keeps phoning in information, depending on whether it happens to be started or not? With a weird.
Adam? Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Adam, if we have an agent on a host, do we still regularly run check host on that host?
I don't remember what the triggers are for check host. I know if obviously host is offline, it's going to keep doing that. I think it does it anyway on like a regular interval. So I think check host runs regardless. But as for the maintenance stuff with the agent, yeah, if we have this thing where we skip stopping everything, then the agent would still be reporting if you put it in maintenance mode like that. But the way I was sort of thinking of this maintenance mode stuff with the skipping, the stopping stuff is you'd only really want to use that if the host was already sort of offline or something was wrong with it. Because if it wasn't, why not just stop everything anyway? So if that was already offline, then the agent's not going to be reporting anyway. So I don't think it should really be a big deal. And you can just kind of, if you decide to skip stopping everything, then yeah, it'll keep reporting. But I don't see why that would really matter.
No harm done. Well, it means we won't reschedule. I guess we will reschedule anyway because yeah, okay.
Yeah. If we're just rescheduling based on whether the host is like marked as like an offline or maintenance state, then it won't matter the agent's reporting there.
Okay. Anything regarding offline hosts? Sage, you just added a topic.
Yeah, can we talk about how the agent finds the new active manager? Because this is like one of my pet peeves after watching Posy also is that every time you do a failover, it takes like, I don't know, minutes for it to like redeploy every single agent. And just so the new agents find the new manager, and so you don't get any updated stats until like you go and you touch every node. Kind of maybe not the best way to do it. I had a couple ideas there. One option is new manager folks old agents to provide point. So because all those agents have a port that they're listening to, if as long as we record that state somewhere and configure them when the new manager comes up, they could just do a really quick REST query, whatever, to all of them, and just give them the new reporting IP. So that's maybe faster, but it's still the manager has to go iterate over all of them and poke them. Another option would be if the agent asks Mon for active manager. It hasn't. Like if the agent hasn't been able to phone in, it'll just do a Ceph CLI command to ask the manager for whatever the new address is. And that could be something like Ceph manager services, something like that. There could just be some metadata in the manager map or whatever that indicates what the right port and IP is.
Yeah, I was going to run these Ceph commands. We have to have Ceph ADM on all the hosts. We could do a shell command or something. I guess we would actually because the agent already has it. So does it need certain keys to run that, or is that like a low permissions?
For this, I mean, it needs like on R or something similar like that. I mean, we can give it a capability for that. It would need a Cephx key.
Right now they don't have any keys because they didn't need to do anything. Just give them an extra.
Yeah. Maybe that isn't the best option. But that's, I guess the nice thing about that is that after the manager fails over, it wouldn't have to do any work necessarily. It would just wait a few seconds and the agents would start reporting in again. Then we would only have to go redeploy agents if we don't hear from them after a while.
And the other one, I think the first option as well would also probably be fairly fast because when we do the poking thing, it usually starts up its own little thread that goes and does that. So I think you could just start up a bunch of threads really fast and it all go.
Yeah.
So it might be fast enough. And also it wouldn't have to wait for the responses, whatever.
Yeah.
It just depends if we think it's worth putting in the keys and everything.
Don't the standby managers redirect to the active manager?
Don't they do what?
Don't they redirect to the active manager?
Yes, but only if they're answering on a fixed port. And we don't. The manager reporting IP is dynamic.
But at least we could send the agent all the known managers at a time, and then we could.
The sort of it doesn't quite work like that because it doesn't quite work like that. So the way that the normal manager works is every manager is basically a client, which is called the manager standby, and it's basically a client of the monitor, and it's subscribing to cluster updates or whatever. And based on whoever gets elected as the active manager, it starts up the whole manager infrastructure, and that whole manager is the thing that binds to its own Ceph endpoint and ports and all that stuff. And so you don't know how to talk to, at least using the Cephx protocol, you can't talk to all the standby managers because they aren't running per se. They just have this sort of standby component.
But they're running the standby modules.
Yes, so they do that. And the standby modules, only certain modules bind to ports, but they bind to generally a fixed port, which is why managers normally have to run on separate hosts. If you run them on the same host, then you have to disable that standby stuff because otherwise they'll port conflict. But even then, we made it so that the agent stuff doesn't bind to a fixed port. It binds to a dynamic port so that you could have clusters without. Because right now, if you run multiple clusters on the same host, you have to be careful that they don't have active managers or the manager's services are all configured on like custom ports, which is what vStart does. But it's like a little bit tedious, and that seemed like too much of a lift to require that for just basic functioning of Ceph ADM at all, for the agent to work at all. Like you have to, whatever. I think in the
But at
summer,
least we could configure the agent to know all known managers at the time.
we could.
And then just have the manager, the agent try a different standby manager and see if it gets a proper redirect to the active manager, and then just update its own configuration.
Yeah, we could try something like that, and then we just have to. So right now it has a dependency on the IP of the active manager. So I guess we'd have to change it to be dependency on the list of all the manager IPs, because if you move where the standby managers are as well, you still have to tell it where all the different managers are.
Yeah,
We could do
it's
that, and then it could.
like the active manager picks a random port that it is able to bind to, and that's the one that it uses. But like the standby managers might not be able to bind to that port, right? And
Exactly. So just the host names are not enough. No, are not enough. We need to have the exact host name plus port for each.
And I guess that would mean that the standby Ceph ADM modules would need to also like try to bind to a port and would need to share that port with the active manager so that those could be shared with the agents. It seems like one of those things that will like help, but it isn't necessary. It's like an optimization, or like because the standby manager isn't always going to be online in time to like go do this or whatever. So it's just like only a, which makes me wonder if it's worth it because it's a bit complicated. I guess my gut says to start with number one, where we just make it a really efficient way to like update the reporting IP for the current agents. Because I think those queries would be really quick.
Have the agent and do the agents start an open port at this time, or are they just clients? I think they're just clients, right, Adam?
They have a port also.
They listen on a port. Because the agent has to be able to know when, so it has like a counter. It's used like a sort of a like pseudo Lamport clock, and he has to know when to update the number so that he can tell if the metadata it gets back is up to date. So we have to be able to inform it.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. Okay.
So we have to extend that protocol a little bit to allow updates for the reporting address and also, yeah.
Yeah, maybe just have a generic update or like dependencies thing, because it has all these like files where it stores like the various values or things. I could just have it update all of them. We just send like the
updated JSON blob with the
I think it actually is a JSON file. It's just a one JSON file that has like a list of the things it has. We could just update them real quick. Send it over.
a reconfig basically, right?
Yeah, it would just be a reconfig over HTTP instead of SSH.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for today? Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Have a great Thursday. Oh, have a great Tuesday. Sorry. And see you next week.
Cool.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.